All right, let's get started. So we are streaming this on Twitch, and we're doing something really crazy here, which is that we are letting the world eavesdrop on part of what I, for example, actually do every day, which is designing pieces of Wolfram language and so on. So this is, I think our title is Behind the Scenes in Real-World Software Development. This is the pilot episode, which is another way of saying this may be a total disaster. Um, the particular topic we're doing, I've had a bunch of other design reviews today, but the particular one we're doing here is making real-time connections to a mail server, initially through the IMAP protocol. And so we are talking about, we've had several previous meetings, and there's some pieces of code that have been written, and we are going to continue looking at this. Okay, so let's see. So I should have here the result of connecting the mail server. Are we still planning to use this mail server connect thing, or are we planning to do this differently? Fahim.
Uh, it's up for discussion, but I think it's useful to have something like that, but perhaps it would look like Cloud Connect.
Why Cloud Connect? I mean, so okay, so but this
It
is
might
going.
look like Cloud Connect. Maybe it would be just Mail Connect, or perhaps it won't be Mail Server Connect.
What would the server part mean anyway? I mean, it's mail is presumably on a server, but who knows whether it's on a remote server or some local thing or something else.
Right, so that's why the URL is there. And
So if I go, so what happens if I say, so what are the possible things here? Do we have a list of, so this was, no. Well, that's definitely a bad result.
yeah, could you connect again?
Do we need to connect again? No, that's
Uh,
working fine.
oh, okay, I don't. All right.
So, okay, so there the folders show up as, by the way, for him there's a lot of background noise for you, but um, so the folders show up like file folders here. And is that what we decided we wanted, or we have this whole folder object concept? We're not sure. Let's take a look. Okay, so you wanted to show me what happens with the search.
Right.
Okay, so let's try this. So what is this going to do? This is going to do sent since yesterday. So what is that? That doesn't seem right.
Sorry. You need to connect to a folder first. So you need to do MS inbox.
Of quotes inbox, like that?
Yeah, uppercase, yes.
Okay.
And now you want to do, could you name it a variable like inbox equal MS inbox?
Okay.
And now do mail search of inbox.
I don't know, why am I? Okay, and then what am I doing? Then the same association here?
Yes.
This is not going quickly. What is that?
I'm not quite sure. I think you may have
Some weird character in my email. Some weird character is sending me some email with weird
yes.
characters. Um, okay, is this going to work at all?
It should. Maybe you have too
What on
many
earth
emails.
is this? Newsletters GR compliances does not exist.
Yeah, so that's sort of the output.
So what is this? Is this incoming mail or is this? Oh, this
This
is
is
inbox.
actually your inbox. That's how your inbox looks for the past 2 days.
Oh, I see. So this is my most recent 3 emails here.
Yes, it's a reverse of, yeah.
Okay. So there's a whole bunch of. So if I were to say here, so this is a data set of that inbox. That's pretty cool.
Yes, yes.
Okay. So for example, if I'm to, so what are these? What is this display? This is nice. The summary looks nice. So if I were to take, for example, here, let me name this. Let's go ahead and name that um, result inbox dataset equals that. And now let's say inbox ds of all, comma, what was that thing? Date? Was that the...
Summary.
No, 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 not the second column.
I think that was date.
Okay, so now I can say, why, boy, why is this scrolling so slowly? This must have to do with the way that Twitch is interacting with everything. So if I say date histogram, what is going on here? This is not even scrolling. What is happening? Well, one of the rules for doing this on Twitch is that it doesn't actually interfere with us getting work done, and this is unfortunately a problem because... Okay, so what does this mean? So why does it... So it's got something from September 11th, which is crazy, and most of this stuff is much more recent.
Yes, that probably is parsing error on my end.
Okay. All right, so if I say differences of %11, I should be getting... That's weird. I should get... Okay. Well, I want minus of that, and then... No, what the heck is this? That should be... What are these dates? Do you see what I'm seeing here? So this is... These should be the dates between successive messages, right? The times between successive messages.
Yes.
Well, why are they both negative and positive? How can there be a message? I mean, it depends what that field is actually representing. So if I say... Oh gosh, this is not typing properly. You understand the question? So let's get the first 10 of these. And now 57, 52, 51. Those are all going down. So if I say differences there, okay, that's fine. But then why do we end up getting some which are plus? That must be a time zone problem. Yeah, look at that. That, I bet that, what's that?
Yeah, it's likely time zones are not being done correctly.
Right, so that was GMT minus 4. So if I say 20 here, okay, so fine. So we've got some issue with that. Yeah, look at that. So that is there, but they all say GMT minus 4, but I bet they're not all GMT minus 4. Right?
Yeah. Yeah.
Okay. So, all right. So let's, but what we really want to concentrate on is the design here. So, I mean, this is very cool. And I mean, we can make a histogram, presumably, of the things in line 14. Gosh, this is scrolling like crazy slow. Okay, so mildly interesting. That's probably the actual results. I don't know what these are here, and that's a glitch there, probably from that thing that was misparsed. Okay, so now if I say, for example, let's see, if I take that original inbox ds thing, so I say take inbox ds comma 3, for example. Okay. So that is the top 3 entries in my inbox. It's pretty cool. It almost looks like Apple Mail. All right, let's take a look at what's actually here. So you have, so what is this? Is this the complete association of what was, what we were able to parse?
Yes, so it is the envelope information and attachments, all those things that we can actually parse. And it also contains the message itself, the text message, not the HTML bit.
So what happens if there's an attachment? Or,
If you scroll to the, I don't know, right, then you will probably see if it had a attachment, then you will see it.
okay, so this is that third message there.
Right.
Okay,
So,
so what am I seeing? What's that?
oh
Attachments, there
yeah,
are none.
there's no attachment.
Okay, so question for folks who know about email here. So this is just some string, and there's no useful way that we can break up that string. Is that correct? And is the message ID the thing with angle brackets, or is the message ID the thing without angle brackets?
I believe it is with the angle bracket, but Jason would know.
Yeah, the angle brackets are usually the message ID.
Okay, so those are part of the ID.
Correct.
Okay. So what is the sequence ID?
That's the identification of the mail in your inbox. So if you wanted to grab a part of the particular message, you have to give that key. And it's useful, but perhaps not
Okay.
for the users.
Okay, so this to thing here is, why is this? Okay, so that's a list and each one is broken like that. Is that what we
Yes.
really want to do?
Well, it makes sense because then you can filter rather quickly, you see, if you want particular domain. And sometimes name might not be present.
But wait a minute, don't we have in our mail, I mean, if we look at just, what is the thing? Mbox, the Mbox format, the, what is the mail import format that you're using for this? Is it
I'm
Mbox?
not using, EML is the right one to look at.
Why is this so slow? What is happening here? It's crazy. Okay. So when in this case, toList is just a list of strings, isn't it? And toNameList, right? So we want to follow the exact same conventions.
Yes, yes.
Okay. So if this is, I mean, then this should be called toRules or some such other thing. And by the way, the CC line is capital C lowercase c. And that should be CC list. And I don't. So why is this importer not the same as the importer that we're using for other things? Do you understand my question?
No.
Okay. Look, if I took this piece of my mailbox and I imported it through the EML importer, I would get some association with a bunch of fields, right?
Yes.
Okay. So I'm asking, why are these fields not the same as the fields over here?
Right, because there are a few things. First of all, this is not the whole message. This is EML. So once you actually get the email, we are not fetching emails. We are looking at the search results. So that's why it's a little bit different.
Okay, so fine. But so one of the things we need to do is make sure that it's the same so that, for example, if you took this and exported it again, for example, if we gave this to send mail, right, that it would just work.
Yes.
Okay, so what we've got here is a toList. So what you're saying is that it's useful to break the to thing into an association of some kind, right?
Yes.
Okay. So we should allow that also for EML importing. And I think we've got a toList here, and maybe we say toList rules or some such other thing to represent this fully, fully broken apart version. Does that make sense?
Yes.
Who is responsible for the EML importer?
It's Sean Cherin.
Okay. Do we want to get him to join this meeting?
I will check with him.
Okay. Okay. Uh, okay. Fine. So let's say I want to get, so the summary, where do I get the actual text of the message?
It is under message if you did.
Okay, so wait a minute. This is another one of your association thingamadigs here. So my suggestion is in this summary view that you're getting, well, I don't know what you want to do here. Look, I think it is better in this summary view. What happened here? So this is what you got from looking at a particular folder. Is that correct?
Yes.
And that's everything about that folder. Is that true? Is that the complete? So what I'm suggesting is something that would duplicate some of the information in that folder to have something which has both the toList and the toList rules. Correct?
Yes.
Which is a little crazy, but now, by the way, why did this not turn into something like this? Why did that not turn into a sub-association in the dataset? Do you understand my question? Do we know?
No.
I mean, maybe we should try, let's try this one here. So that is %20 sub 2. Okay, again, for some bizarre reason, this doesn't... okay, now why did this... What is this doing? This is the toList here. I don't understand why something that ends up in my inbox has John in the toList.
That probably is a parsing error, or you received it as a CC.
But I didn't.
That's what. No, you did. Look.
Oh, I see. Parth responded, and okay, fair enough. All right. So now, how do I see the text of number 2 here?
There is a message to it. So.
Oh, I see. There. So I see. So I simply click that message thing.
Yeah.
Oh, that's cool. Okay, I'm actually interested to know what this says. Okay, so this is just the standard formatting from dataset, is that correct?
The text is, yes, precisely.
It's just a string.
Yeah.
But you haven't broken it into these quoting blocks and things like this, right?
No.
Okay, all right, well this is rather beautiful. All right, so let's go back then and look at so how did you make this summary? I don't understand. Oh, the summary is just another string, is that right?
No, it's actually a grid box to make it look nice and pretty.
So if I actually extract it, what will I see? So if I say...
It's probably a grid box with item styles and all those fancy...
I mean, why is this echo not echoing? This is just so crazy. Okay, so it's a bunch of weird nonsense. Okay, well, it looks beautiful, but is this really what we want? And how do we think about this? I mean, maybe we should have this wrapped in some kind of thing so that if you actually get it out like this, it has an interpretation box that causes it to come out in some different way.
Could work, yeah.
Let's investigate that. Okay, but let's come back to our main discussion. Okay, so this is the first thing you're showing is so if I were to do a search, the search results would come out in this kind of form as well. Is that correct?
Yes.
You know, it occurs to me that for our purposes, if you are trying to extract things, it would probably be useful to number, if we can do that in some elegant way, to actually number or to have some identifier here. And by the way, this name none doesn't seem promising. I mean, that should surely be missing of some kind.
Yes.
But again, I really think that this sender thing should just say, you know, parth p at wolf, you know, parth angle bracket path p at whatever, rather than this form here. So I tend to think that what is returned, I mean, maybe we can kind of hack it a bit and have the early parts of this this association that you're likely to see here be the sender, and then later on have the sender rules. but I don't even understand what the difference in sender and from is. What's the difference in sender and from?
Because you could do a relay, I believe. Jason would know.
Jason, can you comment on that?
Yeah. The sender is the actual sent from person. From can be, it's kind of an arbitrary thing that can be.
Okay, so in our EML importer, how are we finding the genuine sender? Or do we not have that? Did Sean join? No? Sushma, did you find Sean? Sushma, you're on mute.
She may not be back from tracking him down yet.
Okay, does anybody else know the answer to that? What?
Sean is on his way.
Okay. Okay, so we've got a question for him that we'll ask when he shows up. Okay. So let's go back here to okay, so again, remember our overall objective. So we want to be able to do analytics. So for example, yeah, top recipients, top things like this. So for example, if I want to do a graph of mail recipients here, what I would do is I would extract, see that's actually going to be a mess, and that's a good reason to have the complete, I guess I could get the complete sender associations there, and I could look at, so what would I need to do in my inbox right now with whatever it is, what would I need to do to extract what I'm looking for is the graph of mail recipients. So that means who is in common, right, between, if I extract the two lists, am I making sense? Is that right? That I would be extracting from that inbox DS, I just wish it was echoing my keystrokes better. Inbox DS, I would extract all comma 2. Is that correct? And okay, so that's a whole long list of...
Stephen?
Yes.
Stephen, we can't hear you.
Ah, great. Okay. Well,
You're back.
fascinating. Well, that might... okay. All right. So anyway, so this is the... So how would you make a graph from these email recipients? So this is showing each one of these. We kind of want to join... What do we want to do? We want to make something where we show for each, you know, who co-receives email with who else. Am I making sense? And how would we do that? So one thing I can do here is just a simple, gosh, this keystroke failure to echo is horrifying. Okay, so now I've got, this is a real straightforward thing. This is the number of recipients. Okay, so that shows the distribution of number of recipients of mail that I'm receiving. It's kind of interesting. All right, so what you've got here seems to be reasonably effective in terms of, so let's look at domains actually. So let's go ahead and say, so how would I extract the domains? So for each of these, what I would want to do, just for fun, I'd like to see the domains that these are going to, I guess. So that's line 25. So, I mean, I'm just doing this as an example. Normal, line 25. And then I probably want to say flatten that. And then for each of those, I want to extract. Okay, so that's a great big long list. And so for each of those, I want to extract the domain. Actually, I probably could make this a little bit simpler. And then I just want to say counts. right? Maybe I can make a word cloud. So this will be people who might have CC'd me. I mean, who knows what these are? Okay, that's kind of cool. Yeah.
I see an issue in the previous analysis.
Yep.
The name is not really significant.
Which name?
So for each email address, you have name, user, and domain, right?
I guess so. Was that what the fields were?
The name is really like a comment, and it can change, and it doesn't matter a lot. So
That's
the email is only the user and the domain.
That's true. But so, I mean, but that's an argument for what Fahim has done here of separating, putting these things as separate elements in the association, right? So that you can choose to only look at the genuine user. But we don't have a similar thing. Did Sean finally join us?
Yeah.
Okay, so we have a question about the EML importer. So right now, so first question is the genuine sender, rather than the I don't know what is it? XN from I don't know what
right. So there's a from header that will basically, you can put whatever you want for the name of the person. If you want to actually determine where it comes from, you have to look at the received headers.
Okay.
That would be the elements of like delivery chain records.
Where is that? So is that part of what the importer imports?
Yeah. That's an email element.
Okay, but so why aren't we then? So Fahim has chosen here to have a much more exposed version of the genuine sender, right? And
yes.
so we probably want that. So maybe Jason can say something about that. How much do we want to expose the genuine sender? It seems useful to expose the genuine sender, right? Rather than to hide it under some delivery chain records. Is it obvious from the delivery chain record who the original sender was?
You can. It's fairly easy to find in the header of the email.
Okay, but is it unique and well defined, or is it something where, I mean, if you look at a piece of spam, for example, what will that typically look like? Well, that is unspoofable, or is it not unspoofable?
Well, so you could have some generic thing in the from field of the header, and then generally once you dig down into the received from, you can see the actual domain that sent the mail.
Okay, but can you see more than the domain? Can you see the whole name, user name domain, or can you just see the domain?
No, you can't really guarantee who sent it. You just know where it came from.
The domain that it came from.
Right.
Okay, so
and
Fahim,
you can put whatever you want for the name.
Okay, but Fahim, what are you picking up when you say sender in your stuff?
I am picking the actual sender, where it came from, the domain.
The domain, but what about the username?
That's the part of IMAP, IETF, or RFC lookup. So I'll have to look into that to make sure what.
Wait. So this is IMAP gives you some way to access what it considers the sender. Is that correct?
Yes, exactly.
Okay, which we believe is coming from the delivery chain records. Is that right?
Yes.
Okay, so we need to figure out how that works. And whatever it is that IMAP is doing, we should expose it more in the EML importer, right? And we should, but I think for purposes here, we should hide it to the same level that it's been hidden in the EML importer. That is, we should concentrate on the from list that is, you know what I'm saying? The from, well here, so the from line that is the as given from line, which might be spoofed if somebody's playing a game or whatever else. Does that make sense?
Yes.
I think because that's what you typically see. That's what I will see in my mail client typically, is the from line as spoofed or whatever. Isn't that correct?
Yes.
Okay, fine. So
It's all completely arbitrary.
go ahead. Sorry, what, Nicholas?
Sender is also completely arbitrary. You can put whatever you like in sender.
But what is sender? I mean, sender is what Fahim says comes from the IMAP protocol.
From what I know, from and sender are defined in the RFC as arbitrary things. So, for instance, if you send something through a secretary,
yep,
the secretary is the sender, and you dictate the message, you are the from. It's something like that. So when you search something through a program, sometimes the program puts itself into sender, but by the time you are reading in IMAP, they are completely obscure and arbitrary strings. There is something else that is called the envelope in emails. The
right.
envelope is what is being built, what is being handled at SMTP level.
Right.
So I'm parsing the envelope. So I ask for particularly envelope.
Oh,
that's the output over there. So there is actually an IMAP command which says, give me the envelope information. And
so
that
this is not the sender field that can be also present in a message. There could be a sender field inside the message.
Okay, look, so what we're saying is there are three different things here, and the most important, okay, so there seem to be multiple criteria. First of all, in our mail handling system here, in our sort of IMAP-based mail handling system, it better be the case that that what you see is more or less what you would see in a typical mail client. Okay, which I don't believe is the case right now. First point. Second point is whatever we do there has to be compatible with what we do in the EML importer, and it also has to be compatible with what SendMail does. And I believe right now, Sean, maybe you can speak to this, that what SendMail does is compatible with what EML does, what the EML importer does. Is that correct?
It is correct. We're just looking at the from header.
No, I understand, but effectively SendMail is like an EML exporter. Is that true? How does
Chenyu? I think. Well, basically, we use Java Mail to construct the message and actually construct a message in Java Mail and then just send it to the server.
Okay, but that construction comes from the EML. We have the original Wolfram Language Association that has a bunch of these fields, right?
Mm-hmm.
And from those fields, we are constructing something which will be, so what should happen is there should be a round trip that's possible where you go, from something which is an association here through to it arrives in my mailbox. Then from my mailbox, I live connect to the mailbox, and then I should be able to get these associations back from the association that I get out here should be identical to the association that I put in and then sent through SendMail. Does that make sense?
Yeah. Yes.
But I don't think it's true right now. So that's one thing that we need to make sure of. So Sushma, I think that's for you to figure out to make sure that that happens.
Okay.
And who is let's see, we're not actively doing much on mail import and export, are we?
No.
Okay. And so who is fine. Okay, well, so there may be some tweaks needed there, may not be. I mean, I think we were pretty careful in the design of this, so I think this is probably going to be pretty decent, with the exception that you guys are pointing out that these various... So there are three things as I understand it. There's a from, there's a sender, and there's stuff inside the envelope. Is that correct? I mean, I only knew about the from and the stuff inside the envelope before. Is there some third thing that's some kind of sender that's outside the envelope, so to speak? Anybody know? Want to comment? Nicholas? Jason?
What is called the envelope is what is being given to the mail or to a team, to the mail transfer agent.
Right.
And that can be, I don't know what.
Okay, so there's something else called sender, which Fahim is getting from the IMAP, from the IMAP transfer mechanism.
Yes. So in IMAP, you can precisely ask for envelope information. So that is the information that I am displaying. I'm not doing anything to it. And however RFC defines it, that's the term I'm using. I'm not making up any new information here. So what might have not happened is I didn't look at EML and I don't know the correspondence between RFC and the EML documentation.
Okay. So fine. I think we should try to follow what we've done for EML as much as possible.
Right.
Okay. And what I'm suggesting here is that what we do, wherever that got to, yeah, there we go, is that, I guess we have to have everything in this association. It's a shame to have to repeat things, but I think it's still probably useful. Well, actually, I mean, what you're showing here, you already see in the summary who the
Exactly.
who the sender
That's
was.
why
So who cares? Yeah.
Yeah, that's why I have put it in this way. Summary is something you find it quickly. Everything else is more complicated.
Yeah, but this is the complete information. So
Yes.
we definitely want the from string here,
Sure.
right? As well as this rules thing, and we should be able to get the rules from EML. Okay, let's take a look at what everything is that you've got in this list. Where was it? I had put everything about this system is broken right now. It's scrolling like unbelievably slowly. Okay, so apart from that, there are things that are missing. Let's see. Attachments will be what? The file names or what?
Yes, file names and file sizes and the format.
Well, why don't you import the thing so it's an actual expression?
No, because then it will be really slow, right? You don't want to import. This is a search result. You don't want to import everything while you're doing the search. You just want to get the useful information.
Okay, but this is then different. I mean, what we're doing for text search is we're returning content objects,
right,
which
so
are lazy. Yeah.
Yeah, exactly. That's what I have to implement. It's not implemented yet.
So are you suggesting then that the content objects, that we should use content objects, but that the visible version of the content object should in this case be the email summary?
Yes.
That seems like a good idea. By the way, that's not right. You should do the same heuristics as email clients do, of saying, if it's today, if it's the, that would be the time of day for today because that's today, right?
Yes, absolutely.
Okay, so all right, so then what we're seeing here is mail search. The mail search you're saying would ultimately work more like, gosh, I wish this wasn't so slow. What is going on here? This is some interaction between Twitch, OBS, Zoom, and everything else. Okay, so in any case, if we look at text search, then if we look here, then what we're doing, let's take a look here. We've got, oh my god. So I run that index, and then here what I'm getting, my god, I can barely use this. Oh, that's not good. Well, what am I'm running 11.3, right?
Yes.
So that's probably why this doesn't work. Okay, so let's try running let's try running the release version. That's interesting. That's probably for you, Nicholas, over here.
Yes, surely. I will need to address that. We already saw that issue in 11.3.
Okay, fine. All right, fine. So, okay, so then I do this. I get this whatever is happening here. So that's building an index. So now, in the case of, so this is the analog of what you were returning as mail server object, correct, Fahim? What I can do with this is like what you can do with a mail server object. Did we lose you?
Sorry, I was on mute. Yes.
So if I say text search of index here, comma, fish or something, oops, what this will do is it will return, okay, this rather useless search result object. Why are we, let's see, it is Chiara with us, by the way? Is,
Yes,
why are we doing it this way? What is the point of this? Why are we not returning the list of content objects?
the list of content objects, because this way we can display information, right? I mean,
oh, I see. But if we previewed the content objects, we would be able to do the same thing, right? So here,
also I think we want to do things like this way you can extract global information like the count, the snippets of all, I don't know, this was the original design.
Fair enough. Okay. All right. So the analog of that would be essentially the data set. What would happen, I mean, if we just returned a data set here? If we didn't return...
This was discussed last week, and I think it's something that, yeah, we decided to try, I think, but yeah.
Okay, but do we need to have, if the list is very long, is the idea that the subsequent pages will be lazy somehow?
Yeah, there was that thing that we needed a lazy data set in order to be able to do that. I mean, to do that properly. Otherwise, it will take a long time to load everything, and possibly too much time.
Right. But okay, so what is the analog between content object and, I mean, right now here we are returning a data set for the complete results, and each element here is not a content object, and instead it just has the actual raw text of the message and potentially the attachments, which Fahim is saying is not going to work very well because the attachments could be huge. Right? Mm-hmm. Now a content object, if I'm not mistaken, has the feature that it is lazy loading. Is that true? Yeah, it doesn't actually have the content right there.
Yes, you can extract it, but it doesn't. It has the pointer to the content.
Fair enough. But I mean that, you know, at very least we could use a content object mechanism for the attachments. Where are the attachments anyway? Are the attachments still on the mail server?
Yes.
Okay. All right. Well, okay, so let's take a look at, okay, so we still have a bit of a mess there in my opinion. Search for a subset, then apply a function. Yeah, that's an interesting thing. So how would we do that? In your dataset mechanism, that would work very nicely. If we wanted to, for example, find all those messages, well, so how would we do it? So given, what is the actual handle to each message? So let's say I wanted to search these messages and find everyone that was from a certain domain and delete all those messages. How would I do it?
Right, so we haven't implemented anything, but you would have functions like mail delete, and then you would map over a pointer. I'm not exactly sure what that looks like.
Yeah, well, so that's the place where we have trouble. So if content object, if we were using content object, for example, I could imagine that we can say something like mail delete of the content object, and it effectively has a handle to that mail item. See what I'm saying? Whereas by the time you've exposed the whole thing in this data set, it's too late. Except maybe you do have something. I mean, you can go to the message ID, but that's kind of hacky.
Right, but you could also return just something like a content object that actually points to the mail on the server. And if you delete that, if you get a list of that using the data set, you don't have the information, but it's hidden in the meta information of the object. And then you can delete it using mail delete.
Okay, let me walk through that again. Hold on a second. We had some notes from a previous time here about where were they? Sushma, do you know where those notes were? The ones about here we go. Is this it? Yes, this is it. So this was is this still current or not?
That
Anybody
is
know?
current. Yes.
Okay, so let's walk through this again. So the trade-off is, I mean, we want something where we would like it to be the case that if you say, okay, so first of all, you have to do some connection. And we believe that that has to be, and what's it going to return? It's going to return a mail server object, we think, which then in turn contains a bunch of folders. Is that right?
Yes.
But the folders, if I extract a single folder, what is it? Is it a mail? You know, what is that? And is there a difference between a mail server object and, I mean, you're naming these individual folders mail object, is that correct?
Yes.
What's the difference between a mail server object and a mail object?
Mail object is the folder because you fetch messages from the folder, not the server. And once you have the folder object, that's what you were doing right now when you did inbox equal, and then you did mail search of inbox.
No, I understand that, but why do we need, what is the concept of a mail server object that is different from just the tip of the hierarchy of mail folders represented by mail objects? See, like in a file system, right? The root is still a file.
Yes, that's not the case in IMAP.
Well, why is it different? I mean, we don't...
Because you can't really search the server, right? That's the key importance. You can't extract messages from the server object. You just can't do it.
Well, I mean, we could do it. We could build something that just, you know, maps over all of the... I mean, it might be very slow, but we could perfectly well...
Yes,
you know,
we could. Absolutely,
right.
yes.
So why don't we? I mean, wouldn't that be simpler for people? If you say you connect to the mail server, you get back a mail object, that mail object, since you've got hierarchical folders anyway, or is it the case, why are we not returning just a list of the folders? No, that doesn't make sense. Walk me through, okay, so if I change if I go to a particular mail folder, is it hierarchical? Or is it, or am I always going down to a specific?
You're always going down to specific. So if you see your folder view, there might be subfolders in it. I'm not exactly.
Yeah, there are. Yeah, but
okay. Then you go to exact folder. You don't go to the folder above it to get to the folder below it. You go to the exact one.
Okay, so what you're saying is that if I would look here, so I've got MS folders there, and I've got all kinds of random folders, right?
Yes.
And okay, all kinds of weird stuff here, which I should delete actually. Okay, so you're saying from, I mean, but there's a default folder that I'm using for mail search, which is the inbox, or not?
No, it's just like any other folder.
Although arguably it should be the default.
Yes.
But so what would that then look like? I mean, so in other words, we connect to the server, we've got a bunch of folders there, but we have a default folder that is used for mail search. Is that right? I mean, so if I just say mail search, let's imagine that I'm just saying mail search, and I wish this thing was echoing properly. You know what? I wonder if I use 11.2 whether this problem won't occur. Let me just try that. No, that looks bad as well. It's less bad, slightly less bad. Okay, so if I say mail search, you're and I've got, you know, some. Do we think we're going to have a default place where this search is, or what?
It should be the inbox.
Yeah, I understand, but how is that default going to be set up? Do we have some kind of dollar? We had something kind of thing, dollar mail inbox here,
Yes.
right? Which is the default thing that it searches. Okay. All right. Well, previously we talked about a mail folder object. And what's the difference in a right now we don't have a mail object because everything that comes out just as a, okay, so right now we have the notion of a, okay, so we have mail server connect. I wish this typed properly. Which then leads to a, we claim a mail server object, which I don't like very much, which then contains folders, apparently. This is kind of weird. I mean, why is it useful to ever see the mail server object rather than a list of folders?
I think that's better to see just the folders.
So then if we said, for example, forget about mail connect, we just said mail server connect, we just say mail connect, and that then returns a list of folders. I mean, that's a little weird because maybe the only reason you want mail connect, well, actually, if you have a default mail server, you may not need to use mail connect. Right?
Yeah.
I mean, then this would be, this is getting really weird. This is getting really weird. Because, you know, what's the analog with a file system? So, first of all, the mail server is given by some IMAP string together with some URL together with authentication information. Is that correct?
Yes.
I mean, if we just said, okay, so then what comes back are, there are IMAP addresses, are there not, for all the folders that come back. Is that true? Or is it, in other words, those subfolders, do they have a URL or not?
No. I mean, you could make one, but no.
Okay.
You connect to the server, and then it's sort of like how you work in a file system.
Okay, and let's walk through a few more of these things, okay? So, mail item, what was that?
Mail item is what mail object is sort of represents. You would, if you wanted to delete a mail, you would delete a mail item.
Okay, but then it should be the case that a mail item displays with it as it would in a mail client, but that what happens is that somehow mail search returns a list of mail items. Now, that's different from what we're doing over here. We talked about returning a data set here, but then is it the case in that data set that what we would do is we would have snippet information together with content objects? Would that be the idea?
That's what I was thinking.
But so, Chiara, is that what we were imagining for text search?
Sorry, could you please ask again? Sorry.
So in text search, right, we're talking about what is in the data set, right? And so one possibility is that there is snippet information, that each element of the data set contains snippet of information that's human visible, human readable, and then together with a content object. Would that make sense?
Yes, again, if it is lazy. So that it
well, the content
try...
object is lazy. Right? I mean, the snippet is not lazy. Or do we even think the snippet has to be lazy?
No, what I mean is that this data set needs to...
Right, I understand that if you have a large number of search results, we've got to have a lazy data set. I get that. Right.
Yeah.
So we can't...
I mean, we don't want to generate snippets for all results.
I see. You're saying that in addition to, yeah, well, so basically all the elements of the data set have to be lazy. Is somebody looking at that?
I have sent that to Xavier.
Okay. Okay. All right. So back to this again. Okay, so we're still not... Okay, so in that case, So is there any other function that's like text search where we have to have consistency with this?
Once we discussed web search and Wikipedia search.
Oh, that's right. What do they do right now? Web search returns a dataset, doesn't it? So if I say web image search of aardvark, for example, I think that's just going to return a dataset, which is another good reason for these other things to return datasets. Yeah. Right. I mean, that's just a dataset. We don't have a lot of information there because we're not fetching. I mean, we could potentially have a content object that represents a lazy version of the backup of the page that is in the hyperlink here, right? That will be the analog of what we're doing here, correct?
I think so.
But we're not choosing to do that yet. What happens with Wikipedia search? Does it do the same thing as this does?
Last time I looked at it, it was returning a list of pages, of links, I think.
Oh, what a mess.
And it was, yeah, exactly.
That's horrifying.
Page titles.
That's just crazy. That's wrong. So, who is dealing with Wikipedia search? Does anybody know here? Somebody under Alan. But does anybody, Sushma, do you know who?
No, I don't know.
Okay, so
I will
listen.
check with, yeah.
We need to make sure that this is consistent. And I would think Wikipedia search needs to return the same type of dataset. So look, what we probably should do is to standardize on returning a dataset plus content objects. And the dataset should contain, like here it has a thumbnail. Obviously that's not relevant for email. But in the case of email, we would have the analog of a thumbnail, which is that summary box. Make sense?
Okay.
And then
yes.
the rest, and then these other things can be the various kinds of computable elements together with, in somewhere in here, a content object. Make sense? Okay, now the question is, if you extract that element, I mean, arguably, visually in the dataset, we could make the content object have some more iconic appearance so that it would be the obvious thing to extract if you're in column 1 here. And then that content object has all the back pointer information so that you can basically say mail delete of that content object, if I'm not mistaken, and it will go to the mail server and delete it. Is that also people's understanding?
That's how I understand it.
Okay, and there's no problem in terms of the way that content objects have their metadata and so on, having that back pointer. Just like we have a reference location here, it's perfectly reasonable to have that reference location point back to the mail server, correct?
I'll have to think about that particular thing, but
there's something really funky about the fonts in this content object. I don't know whose issue that is. Kiara, do you know anything about that?
No.
Who is PMing the search stuff?
It's switching from Grady to Fatima.
Okay. So can we get Fatima to go chase that?
Okay. Yep.
Okay. So now, given that content object, for example, the flags of the mail message would be okay. So this dataset can include all the mail message flags, correct?
yes.
That might be in the content object, but they might also be they might be highly visible, and I don't know how you've set it up. Like with your summary, are you indicating what's been read and what's unread?
No, not yet.
Okay, fine. But so that can be there, but there can also be a column that represents those flags. What are the flags that exist? Are they things like they're read and unread? Go ahead.
Yes. So there is answered, which means you have replied to it. Seen, which means you have read it. And a few other ones, custom ones, I think you can. And then there is flagged, which means it has been flagged.
Flagged for what purpose?
No, it's just a flag, like the red thing that appears on the mail client.
Okay. So how we want to present those is a little bit non-trivial because we probably want it to be programmatically easy for somebody to say, I want all my unread messages. I guess that's easy. You can just find
Right,
things
you
for
can
which.
do also the mail search. In mail search, you can do flags goes to answered, and it will return the.
Okay, but that's not an obvious thing because
Right,
that's
okay.
subsetting, right?
Yes.
So when you say flags goes to answered, how do you specify that you want something with the specific flags flagged and answered? Don't we
Yes.
have the same issue in text? Go ahead. What were you going to say?
No, nothing.
Do we have the same issue in text search of when we are looking for any subset versus the exact match for the fields in text search? Nicholas, Chiara?
Well, you can, of course, select by the value of every field.
No, I understand, but do we have a case where it's subsetting? So in this case, what Fahim is saying is that you can say flags arrow answered, right? And what that will give you is all messages where the flags element contains answered, right?
Oh, yes, you have Boolean operators in text search. So you can say status 1 and the rest of the query.
Yeah, I understand, but that's the problem here is that the flags. Look, basically the point here is that what really we should do is to have a thing called flags list, which is a list of all the flags that have been set on a given message, right? But then the question is, what does it look like when you just want to find, in other words, what is the? Do you get what I'm saying? You want to be able to have a simple select that goes through and finds, without having to go 2 levels down, that finds unread messages, for example. Do you get what I'm saying? And by the way, that flags thing, from what you're describing the flags to be, unread is an absence of seen, etc., 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 right? So that's a slightly more complicated query to get that. So we want something where it's easy to see that. So that's let's not address this full issue right now with flags, but you get what I'm saying. I think that's not right. I think we can do better than that. I think we can have something where, yeah, I mean, one way to do it obviously would be to break it apart as each flag corresponds to a separate element of the top level association for the message. Okay, so that what you get is answered arrow true, answered arrow false, flagged arrow. Yeah, that's the right way to do it. If you think about it, that's going to be the right way to do it. Because much more often you're going to want to say, I want all messages that are, not seen, for example. So that means that you want messages for which the seen is false. Do you get what I'm saying?
Yes.
So I think that's the right way to do it. So we should break the flags apart into the sort of top level of that association. Now, what do we do to reset the flags? What do we do? I mean, only certain things can be reset in these content objects. You can't go and change the message, right?
No, you can't.
So IMAP allows you to delete it, move it, change the flags, but not. So then we have to
upload messages. That's how the drafts work. The drafts folder. I haven't hooked it up, but we should be able to take an EML or whatever that is and put it on your drafts. That's totally possible.
Well, that's interesting. So how do we?
And you can put it in any kind of. I had a prototype some time ago, but there is no design for it right now. I'm just focusing on.
Okay, so that's another thing we have to think about. So,
yes.
But what we need to do then is the setting of flags is something where we have to say of the content object. So do we have any precedent for this in other uses of content objects where you're resetting elements of content objects? Does anybody know?
No.
Is that a no you don't know, or is that a no we haven't done it?
Content objects for us are like immutable.
Yeah.
You cannot change them. You cannot change anything in a Lucene index right now.
Yeah, I understand, but this is somewhat different. I mean, it happens to be a different back end.
Yep.
Okay, so then we need something which allows us to modify a content object. So what would be another model for that elsewhere? We'd want something where you say, what would we do? I mean, we would have set options would be a typical way of doing this. Or alternatively, we would have, an L value based on the content object. Am I making sense? So that we would have literally, yeah. I mean, I wonder whether we could do it with set options. I wonder whether that's a crazy way to do it. What is inside a content object? Is a content object, what are these things?
A content object is just a wrapper around an association.
But what does the wrapper look like? Is this a single association inside?
There's a single association inside.
So okay, so in a slight abuse, we might be able to use set options on a content object. So the way that would look is something like, seen arrow true. Am I making sense? It's a little weird, but we need some operation like that that would change the elements. I mean, what would be the literal thing that we would be doing? The literal thing we'd be doing is a replace part. Is that right? I think we'd be doing a replace part on the content object, but that would not push it back into, that's not an L value type thing. That's just saying, take my copy of that content object and do this to it. That's not pushing it back to the source of the content object, like an L value. Does that make sense?
Yes. And now you have to actually send it to the server, telling it, change
Right.
the flag.
Right, but set options conceivably could be made to do that.
Conceivably, yes.
Okay. So we need something like that. Now notice that set options, if the content object contained its folder source information, what folder it was from, right? Then in principle, set options could reset that folder. And if set options attempts to reset something that is not resettable, like the from address or something, then it will just give an error. That makes sense?
Yes.
But then, what you want as a convenience, I mean, we could have a convenience like your mail move function. I'm not hugely keen on that name. Yeah, I mean, the question is, do we mind about having a bunch of these extra things? Okay, so in this current model, we are getting rid of mail item. And what's happening is that mail search and mail connect are both returning. So mail connect would potentially return a data set of folders. What are the folders now? The folders, what are the folders? Are the folders just these data sets that contain content objects?
No. Mail folders won't contain any. It's just a pointer.
Well then, but how do we represent it?
It's a mail object.
Yeah, but okay, what's the analog of a mail object? What if the mail folder was also a content object that just happens to be a mail folder? I mean, just like, origin of species isn't a mail folder, but it is a content object.
It could be. I mean, that's the point. I mean, it's really a pointer. So
right. Well, so maybe the thing in the economy of objects, maybe what should happen is that the folders should be content objects as well, and that what we should return from mail connect, well, it doesn't really matter what we return from mail connect. That's not the most important thing. Actually, the one thing we need to have for mail connect is if we're going to have a mail disconnect, it's got to return a thing that allows you to disconnect. Am I making sense?
yes.
Let's see. So, so how is that going to work? So what is mail connect? What could mail connect return I mean, Cloud Connect rather uselessly returns like it returns something pretty useless. And Cloud Disconnect doesn't take that handle. But can you have multiple? There's no reason why you can't have multiple mail connects running at the same time, right?
Yep, you can have as many as you like.
So it has to return some kind of symbolic representation of the connection to the mail server.
Yes, that's why the mail server object exists.
I understand. Okay. But what is the analogy? Do we have an analog of that elsewhere? Of a live thing that's been connected to? For example, the service connections are things where there is a live thing that was connected to, right? And that what does service connect return?
A service object.
Well, maybe that's what we should do here. Is there any reason why that is a bad idea for this?
Right, we discussed this because it's not expandable and IMAP is more precise.
What do you mean?
We could potentially, there is no reason why we can't, but then it would be a little bit inconvenient.
Why?
It would be more difficult for users to actually know there is a server, and then the search is going to be more bizarre in service execute, I think.
No, we don't want to put that into service execute. That would be silly. No, I'm not suggesting that. I'm suggesting that we have that mail connect is there, but that mail connect returns a service object.
But then you would want to use service execute because that's what service connect does.
No, but you don't need to do that. You can perfectly well use mail search on a service object.
Then people might want to use Twitter on the mail search, you see. If mail search can take service object, why can't you give it any kind of? I mean, that's why it is.
Because it's Twitter is not mail, so right, it's kind of silly.
In our representation, it is still a service object. Maybe I'm getting it wrong.
Well, I'm not sure. Look, I mean, the fact is, we're not just going to support IMAP. We're going to support a bunch of other mail protocols, and are they all representable? What is the difference between a generic service object and the whole diverse zoo of mail protocols?
I mean, only IMAP is the most useful one. There is REST APIs for handling with emails, but they are controlled by whoever is providing the REST API. So it may not be as powerful as IMAP.
Well, I understand that, but we want something which is plug compatible. I mean, as far as the user is concerned, the functionality should be as similar as possible. And those REST APIs fit very well with the service object paradigm, right? I think. Am I missing something? I mean, because that's what a lot of those services are, REST APIs. Am I wrong?
They are all exclusively REST APIs.
Okay, fine. So that's an argument for using service object as the return from mail connect. So that it's opaque. It doesn't matter whether it's an IMAP or a REST API or what it is. Or some future weird, thing. But by the way, does anybody want to comment? Jason or Nicholas or anybody want to comment on whether there are other mail protocols that we care about, or mail connection mechanisms that we care about?
The only other thing that I could think of would be like the exchange connector, but I don't think that's something that we want to do necessarily.
Fair enough. Okay. All right.
The other protocol is POP, but I don't know if.
Yeah, POP is pretty dead, isn't it? I mean, but okay. So fine. Let's. I still think I'm still supporting the idea of trying to shoehorn this into service object, rather than having our own separate a separate mail connection object. And then I'm trying to, I'm pushing the idea. Right now we have a mess of incompatibility between these different search types, and I think we should standardize on returning data sets containing content objects. I think these content objects, we need a mechanism for pushing stuff back into the content objects. And I think we need, and by the way, one of the things that's nice, we don't need, if this is returned as a data set, then anything which is local analytics, you can just do by essentially mapping over the data set. Am I making sense?
Yes.
And things which are pushing back to the server, you will extract from the dataset the content object and then use its essentially back pointers to push the stuff back to the server. So there is the question of whether we want, I mean, I think there's a certain argument that, you know, I'm wondering whether, like we have service execute, whether we should have, you know, delete, set flags, move, etc., 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 as part of a mail action or some such other thing function, rather than breaking them all apart. Anybody got comments on that? Otherwise, we have, because that way we can have things like.
Actually, I have a comment on that. If we have precise functions, for example, mail, well, yeah, you could map them all over the data set. It could work, but I think it will be slightly more awkward.
Well, okay, the question is, what functions do we need? You think we need mail delete, mail move, and the rather bizarre mail set flags. Is that correct?
Yes. I think those are the most used functions that people do with their mail client. So that's why I have them. But
okay. All right, what was this thing here? This mail monitor submit thing. That has to do with, oh, I see. That's setting up a continuous task to monitor the mail server.
yeah.
Is that something we're close to, or is that something we don't worry about
Well,
yet?
it's not very... Okay, so you wanted to do it outside the kernel session, which is outside my domain. Inside the kernel session, then you say that it's not that useful. But what I would like to do is have a task object that is returned using this mail monitor that actually sees incoming messages. Right now, there is no way to do that.
Why does mail connect not return at some kind of task object thing?
It could, but you wanted it to return a service object.
I know that. I know that.
Yes.
I'm seeking having it not return a new kind of thing.
Yeah.
What should it? I mean, a service object is something that will be poked at by various operations. A task object. Well, what's the difference here? I mean, a task object is not used to having operations. I mean, a task object is just the task is just running, and the task has various handlers, but the task is the one that's generating the information, rather than you kicking the task in some way, right? We don't have it. We don't really. But now, what you're saying is, well, what happens if you want to do both those things? So you want to get the task. You want to get a task from the, from the mail server, and that task, what are you going to do with that task? You're going to have handlers of various kinds that represent things.
Could actually, yes, that might not be a bad idea, because that way you can keep the connection open, check for messages every 5 minutes, and so on. What it could have a task object as a meta information that you could extract from either the service object or the mail server object. You could extract that.
Well, I don't think we want some random task lying around, do we? I mean, if you just wanted to do this once and you don't want to update your mail in real time in your session, you're just doing an analysis of some kind, you don't really want a tasks hanging around.
Fair enough.
So, right, but I mean, this mail monitor submit is kind of cool. Mail submit, I don't know what no, mail monitor submit is probably the right thing. And then what it would do is, but what would it send as its handler function keys? That is, what would it send back? Okay, new message received. I guess it sends back the content object that represents that new message. That's fine. Okay, I think we have much of the design here. There are further questions, issues to bring up. Nope. Anybody? Anything? All right. Well,
Okay.
that's sounds good. So we will. Unfortunately, this is a bit of a mess. These notes, Sushma, from me are a bit of a mess because of my stupid non-echoing
Mm-hmm.
mouse. I'll try and clean these up and I'll save them.
Okay.
And all right. I don't know whether anybody's been paying attention to this on Twitch. If they have, I hope they had fun. We at least made some progress here. So hopefully, anybody who's watching this coming to a Wolfram language version near you quite soon will be what we discussed here. Hopefully, I hope. Depends on everybody here. All right. Great. End of our pilot Twitch.